Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Sonny Thadani. He is co founder and CEO of Robin. Robin is a company that helps build more connected, supportive, compassionate school communities where each student, educator, and parent is empowered to thrive. And I am so looking forward to this conversation with you today.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate you having me, and I'm excited to talk more about it.
Yeah, and I just realized that I also interviewed your wife,
Yes, she's
Nithya.
the rock star in the family, and yeah, I was actually just talking to her about it. I said, "Didn't you do this podcast?" She said, "Yeah, you're gonna love Andrea. It's gonna be a lot of fun." So I am super excited.
Well, I loved her too, so I'm so excited to talk with you about your company because there's so much need in general, but definitely in schools. And so I would love to just start by asking you, tell us about the origin of Robin. How did you guys get started?
Sure. Well, thank you for asking, and I appreciate it. And I think most importantly, as I mentioned, I'm a happily married father of three, living here in New York City, and I think that's an important part of the story because how my career and life evolved was me becoming a dad, right? And changing perspective. And so the past 10, 12 years, I was in a different career. I was in professional and financial services here in New York City. Started a company with some of my best friends, and we had a lot of fun, not only success in the business and growing it, but doing it with people that you admire, respect, and can have fun with is just unbelievable. And also during that time in our 30s, started getting married and having kids and having those amazing life experiences. But on the other side of that, over the past couple of years, I've had family members go through some mental health challenges, and it really just had me stop in my tracks and really think about it. Up until then, I didn't even really talk or think about mental health. Didn't fully understand what it really meant and how severe and significant it can really be, and how it can tear families and friends apart. And then a couple years after that, in 2017, I was at a charity event here in New York City, and I was talking. Right next to me at the bar was a gentleman named Mark Barden. I didn't really know who he was at that moment, but he started sharing a story. And I then realized, wow, he was a father who lost his son at the school shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary 10 years ago. And it just shook me to my core hearing that story. And of course, I knew about it. It was in the news. I think everybody around here knows about it. But hearing it from his own words and his mouth was just life altering for me. And I started volunteering for that organization and truly understanding what they do. And I went from a volunteer and started helping them with some fundraising and now serve on their leadership board. And I realized underneath the headlines of gun prevention, gun violence, and all the wonderful things they do, their core products or core messages around mental health for kids. And it's just unbelievable, the two programs they put together and the impact they've had. And frankly, Mark inspired me to say, what else can we do? And he frankly gave me thoughts and ideas and friendship, most importantly. And I looked at my own sort of life and some of my experiences, the good, the bad, and everything in between. And over the past couple of years, I've been fortunate enough to work with a coach. And there are executive coaches, there are speaking coaches, but I actually started working with a quote unquote life coach. And he's much more than that. And as cliche as it does sound, it changed the course of my life. And I thought to myself, boy, when I was 14, 15, and my parents got divorced, and I didn't make any varsity sports, and every girl said no to the junior prom. Boy, I wish I had some of these skill sets that I'm learning today around building resiliency, better decision making, mindfulness. And I thought to myself, why aren't we teaching our kids, right? The naive non-educator in me said, are we teaching this in our schools? If not, we should be. And I started developing sort of a thesis saying, let's go teach them. And I started talking to educators and friends and eventually met my co-founder, Scott Farber. And it was the middle of COVID. It was, we're on the West Side Highway in New York having some iced coffees 6 feet apart during those days. And we started talking, and I started telling him about this idea. And he said, Sonny, you're not going to believe it, but this is a this is what we're going to do, and I'd like to join you. And that's sort of how Robin was born.
Hmm. Oh man. Okay, so the vision, the vision for Robin when you started versus where you're at right now, which is just a few years later, but has it shifted at all?
It has. I mean, the core mission and North Star to support, students and communities is still there for sure. But as we've learned about education, right? It's a business too that we're in, right? Robin is a for-profit business, and the demand is there, right? Schools across this country, right, from Nebraska to New York to Texas and Florida, the need is there. This is not a black and white, rich or poor, red or blue issue. This is a global issue that we're all facing today. But as we started working with schools and truly understanding sort of some of the needs of and challenges and problems of loneliness and disconnected communities, we realized through customers giving us feedback that it's not just the students that need our support. It's actually the teacher, the
Yes.
janitor, the parent, the caregiver.
Hmm.
And we started thinking a little bit more broadly about our customer base and to say if we can't support the adults in our kids' lives, how are we going to create something sustainable and of meaningful impact? And so the thesis started to evolve to say, wait a minute, maybe we got to support the educator in order for them to support the students. And that's sort of how, again, same mission and North Star supporting the communities, but part of the evolution is to wait a minute, the educators in this country and the people that work at these schools, they are going through so much, even well before COVID.
Yeah.
And it took some time getting into these schools and communities and talking to leaders and principals and school counselors and parents about the need and the fear, and now the opportunity that created for Robin, as well as many other wonderful organizations, for profit and not for profit, that do this incredible work.
Hmm. Yeah. Is there a reason why you decided to go for profit instead of nonprofit? Can you help us to understand that?
Sure. I thought about it, and not in great depth, but as I started thinking about some of the most wonderful nonprofits that I support or I'm part of, I think some of the limitations they have is true scale, right? I
Yeah.
mean, there are some wonderful nonprofits that work across nations, and it takes them a long time to do so. I thought that given sort of my background, in business and growth and opportunity, that the best way to reach the most amount of communities would be a for-profit. I also really enjoy building businesses and a company, and uh, I'm a dad living in New York City that needs a job too. Uh,
Yep. Exactly.
quite frankly, right? But
And
it's just been a wonderful, and part of being a for-profit is also to recognize, the wonderful nonprofits that are doing that work and the partnership, the support, and the big public-private partnership opportunities. They're there, and I think that's going to get this done is when we come together, governments, other institutions, the private sector, to create sustainable long-term impact and change.
I think this is a really interesting discussion, actually, because I was in the nonprofit world for quite a while and then decided that Voice of Influence would be for profit for
Right.
similar reasons. Um, Mostly because of I actually thought I could have more impact as a for profit company. So
Yeah.
I can totally relate to what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's probably multiple ways to do it. And at the end of the day, whether it's, A, B, or C, you still have to execute, right? You
Yeah,
still have to get up every day and go to work and make change and set those goals and have that opportunity. So whatever the label might be, it doesn't stop the work ethic and, the fact that you got to figure out a way to do it. And again, kids are a tough customer, right?
yeah.
This day and age with technology, social media, pressure, it's a different world, Andrea. I grew up as a kid in the 80s and 90s, and while I don't remember everything, I don't remember it being this difficult and this challenging. And my kids are super young, so they're not, they're 8, 4, and almost 2. So I'll be learning that more, on the ground in a couple of years. But I just don't remember my middle school and high school experience as challenging as some people are facing today. It was just, and it was maybe a different set of challenges that weren't so visible, but it seems a lot harder
Hmm.
across the board. I don't know if that's your experience or what you're
Yeah,
seeing,
we
but
we've got teenagers. So we've got an
uh,
almost 14-year-old and a 16-year-old. And our 14-year-old told me last fall, I just don't think that I think all school will go online in the next few years. I said, "Why do you think that?" And he said, "I don't think there's going to be enough teachers because of what he's experienced in school and how he sees that teachers are stressed out and
no.
concerned too." Um, yeah, I mean, it's definitely there's a lot of concern, a lot of needs. I mean, I was just thinking this morning about the number of suicide attempts and suicides that I even know about in kids in the last few months. And it's heartbreaking. Um,
It doesn't seem real at times.
no,
You hear about it, and again, I don't think I knew what suicide was in seventh grade or sixth grade or ninth grade, quite frankly.
right.
And now it's something that kids openly talk about, which I think is a positive in terms of opening up that conversation. But as a parent, it's scary. And going back to your comment, your son, if it was your son or daughter who made the teacher comment, I was at a conference a couple months back, and a superintendent of a very large school district got up and talking about some of the challenges, and he said, "There's no pipeline of teachers, so forget the mass exodus you're seeing.
Yeah.
A lot of the big universities are cutting their teachers programs because it's not profitable anymore, or no one's applying to be a teacher. So in a couple of years, who's teaching our kids?
Yeah.
I think it's a problem. It's not getting a lot of airtime for whatever reason, and it's coming. And I don't know what's going to happen in a couple of years. And I see it. You see the stress on teachers. And again, something I think for Robin, the leaders of these schools are recognizing I'm going to do everything I can to keep our teachers in place, including not just an extra, massage chair in the teacher's lounge or
Yeah.
some cookies, which is wonderful. But how about supporting their mental well-being? How about supporting their growth? And not just for professional development's sake, but real, support when they need it. And I applaud those leaders out there that are thinking about this.
I do too. I do too. I love what I was like digging around on your website. Oh my gosh, I just love it so much. Can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly you provide?
Sure. And part of this was really asking schools, right?
Mm,
I think one of my strengths as being in my seat is actually not coming from this background of
yeah.
education, right? It makes me ask basic questions, and when you ask basic questions, you get real answers and you get real thoughts. So when I we did a handful of focus groups early on with principals, superintendents, and educators, and what we heard overwhelmingly is there's not a lot of continuity and consistency in programs today. It's very reactive, right? God forbid there's an incident, a bullying incident, a drug driving incident. I remember something happened in my high school when I was there. Somebody came in, there was a speaker, a coach, an expert. They held quote unquote office hours for a week or two, and then it was kind of back to normal. So the thesis behind Robin is let's be proactive and preventative. We don't know what challenges my kids, your kids are going to face. I do know they're going to face challenges.
Mhm.
Let's arm them and give them the tools they need now. So when X, Y, or Z happens, they are better equipped to deal with it on their own, right? When parents and teachers aren't in the room. So we started developing this curriculum and these videos, these 1 to 3 minute videos by a real person, right? A real coach talking about resiliency or mindfulness or just better decision making, but doing so in a very authentic storytelling way. So our coach Naisha comes up, for example, and talks about building self-esteem and confidence, and she shares a story how she was called names and bullied. And instead of telling kids what to do, what she did is she said, "This is what I did. This is how I got out of that mold. This is how I built myself up and found my inner superpower." And kids relate to that because she's not barking orders. She's telling her story and they're learning through that story. So we have a curriculum with these videos and lesson plans and activities. and they're bite size, 2 to 5 minutes, right? 5 to 10 minutes that you can take out of a day, a week, a couple weeks, and start building these habits because one speaker, one lesson plan, one watching one video is not going to do a thing,
Yep.
right? It's the habit forming, right? Every day, every month, whatever the cadence might be at the school, that's how you start building skill sets. And it builds upon each other when you get to sixth grade to seventh and eighth to ninth. And then I think one of the most important things that we figured out early, while technology is unbelievable and amazing and is going to get us out of many challenges we face, you have to add the human component when we're talking about mental well-being. And that's where coaches, like from these videos, Coach Naisha or Coach John will actually come into your school virtually or in person and reinforce some of the messages and skill sets that they were teaching you over video. And it just makes it human and authentic again. And that's why I think we're seeing some success over the past 2 years is we combine, to me, the best of both worlds, authenticity and technology. Right? Real human connection, which is at the root of everything we do, coupled with technology that makes things easy and more efficient and faster. And that's again, I think that that critical integration is part of the secret sauce.
Hmm. I was just taking a look at your white paper on connectedness. Um, Another topic that I just fully resonate on. And there are so many things in there that I think are relevant. And one of the first things that I noticed was that um, there was a call in the white paper to not just demonize social media. Can you talk to us just a little bit about that? Because there is a lot of that going on. And I do think it's a lot of it's just driven by fear, but it is hard to know as a parent or as a teacher how to encourage healthy interaction with social media. So, can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to. And I think we all hear or read or see the stats out there, and the stats are undeniable. And the connection they make with anxiety and depression is just fact at this point. But as you said, it's in our lives, right? And new technologies, AI, everybody's talking about, we don't know the next one. These things are in our lives, and instead of saying, being so black and white, right? Yes or no, or we have to fully understand how to best leverage it, best use it. We actually did a webinar the other day on this topic, one of our coaches, and it was one of the most well attended webinars we've had because everybody is talking about this. And again, you have two teenagers. I'm assuming they probably have phones and access. And one of the pieces of advice Coach Sarah talked about was, especially with your younger kids who are just learning about phones or learning about social media, understand what they're excited about and what they're into. And if they're into baking or sports or things of that nature, there are some really cool things to learn and follow. And there's nothing wrong with that. It gets scary because of, again, the technology and the algorithms that I will never understand start sharing things that you don't want your kid, or frankly, even I don't want to see on my feed. And I think that's where practical things like time boxing your social media, right? For a 14-year-old, you have school, homework, this. I don't know what that is like just yet, but I imagine it's quite busy. And to say, wow, you have 5, 6 extra hours a week for you, right? Your time reading, Netflix, social media. How much time do you want to spend scrolling on Instagram, right? Like 30 minutes? Great. Carve out 30 minutes and again, healthy time boxing and good content that's out there. Next, understanding when something does happen on social media that makes you feel uncomfortable, maybe a comment, maybe a picture, understanding that, hey, as a parent or a caregiver in a life, come to me and talk to me about it, right? Maybe you don't understand it. And maybe with younger kids, don't lock your room and look at your phone. I mean, I know that's probably tough, but doing it in an open environment, like the kitchen table or the living room, so you can sort of not spy, but understand you're there for them. And, you know, if there is something, you can ask privately or sort of publicly within your family. So there are a couple of those techniques that I'm listening and learning more about. But the other side of that, and we had this, I should send you this clip. Anastasia, a 20-year-old NYU student, was the other panelist. And she talked about, she is not on social media. She gave it up about 2 years, 3 years ago. And she talks about the benefits of her life. and the connection she feels, the relationship she has, how she's better in school, better in social situations. She's outpacing her friends in sort of every metric that there is. And it's almost like, wow, when you're not scrolling, right, you could be doing some pretty powerful things in your life. They could be fun, they could be academic, they could be sports, they could be a whole host of things. But there are other choices you have. And even for me, as a 43-year-old who's supposed to know better than that, I get caught scrolling once in a while. Wait a minute, what am I doing? Right? So there are things to do. Last quick tip, this is for my wife. Maybe she said this. She deletes social media Monday through Friday and picks it up on Saturday and Sunday. That's another interesting strategy, right? To
Mm-hmm.
again manage the intake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I spoke at a conference once where there was a person from Facebook there, and he said that the amount of scrolling that people do a day is the size of the Empire State Building. So all I could do was picture myself going up the Empire State Building one little brick at a time. Isn't that crazy? Every day.
Every day.
Every
Um,
day.
there was a
That's a
stat.
lot.
It's unbelievable. I can't believe some of these statistics. I think it's 30%, according, I think it was Pew Research, 30% of teenage girls spend at least 5 hours a day on social media.
Mm. Okay, so here's the other side of it. So back to my son who's 14, he loves being on VR. He loves connecting with friends on VR. Like that's their preferred method of connecting because they're gaming, but they're also at least moving now. It's not just gaming, there's also some movement involved. But it's so there's like this opportunity to connect, and at the same time, it can become awkward. I noticed that word in the paper as well. The awkwardness of kind of bridging over into the sort of real life, in-person life as well. Um, so like both are really important, but there is that awkwardness and that needing to learn how to connect in
Yeah,
real life as well.
absolutely. And think about what we just went through over the last couple of years. People got so comfortable connecting like this, right? Even phone calls were strange at some point. There was just
Yeah.
Zoom calls and these different ways to connect, and kids especially, but I'll even put adults in this camp. You got back to reality, back to work, back to office buildings, back to schools. People didn't know how to say hello or have those quote unquote water cooler conversations. Adults, kids. And I remember a teacher telling me in middle school specifically, the seventh, eighth graders, it's almost like they're third or fourth graders in behavior and fights and incidences. And part of it is they forgot how to make a friend, forgot how to manage their own emotion, right? Whether it's a bad grade, someone said something in the hallway. And part of what I think society, but sort of what we at Robin are trying to, how do you connect with people again? Right? I talked about the Sandy Hook programs. One of them literally is the program. It's called Saying Hello, right? Say hello to someone that's sitting by themselves at their lunch table, or
Yes.
they're in dodgeball
Acknowledging
class,
people.
and that's it. And nowadays, people like kids are acknowledging by commenting on a post as
Yeah.
opposed to saying hello. Hey,
Yeah.
high five. Here's a pound. And I think back to basics and teaching our kids as a parent, as a teacher, as a institution or a third party. Let's support our kids making connections again. Let's show
Mhm.
them how to make a friend,
Mhm.
share a common interest. And it sounds basic, but maybe we lost that skill and we have to really, just like anything in sports, you have to rebuild the muscle and practice. These are skill sets too, just like shooting a free throw. You have to rebuild and you have to practice doing these things before you get better and really good at it. And
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Actually, even this week on the Voice of Influence podcast, the week that we're talking, that is the topic is acknowledging others, leadership skills and how you acknowledge the importance of. even when it's awkward, even when you feel awkward. Okay, one more thing from the paper that you guys put out, the white paper. I kind of threw my arms up and did one of these, like, yes, when I saw this. But you have in here, it's 8 concrete strategies for helping students foster connection and belonging with each other. The number one thing you talk about is giving students agency. Agency is a huge piece of what we talk about at Voice of Influence. Tell me what you mean by that, by giving students agency, and why it's important for them to have a voice.
Yeah, I think, and probably me being a parent has taught me the most about this in terms of how to manage your kids' behavior or manage to teach them something, right? I don't think anybody from the age of a couple weeks old to where we are today and wants to be told what to do all the time,
Yeah.
right? No one wants to be barked at or yelled at. I think we're learning that across the board. At the same time, right? Young young adults, young kids haven't developed skill sets, don't have experiences, could make the wrong decision, and it could be a significant one. We all, talk about learning how to fail, and it's important to fail, and that's true. But to what degree, right? Do we? Our kids? I live in New York City. My kids need to learn how to cross the street. It's really important. I'm not letting them learn that by themselves. I'm
Yeah.
going to hold their hand really tight. So I think for one, as parents, you have to make a decision and think about what are sort of the must-haves, nice to haves, and how can you, as the adult, a trusted adult in your kids' lives, let your kids start learning for themselves and start using examples in your conversation, right? Kids are seeing everything we do and measuring. I don't realize that. Why do you think they like phones so much? Because we're staring at our phones all day. If we were staring at a book all day and walking around with books, they would do the same thing. So I think at some point, right, recognizing our own behavior and trusting and allowing our kids, especially as they grow up and show that maybe respect or show that opportunity for you to let go and let that leash go or let that opportunity for that student or that kid to say, I got this and I'm going to learn. And if I don't get it right, that's okay. And that's a really important thing. I don't think I've learned fully yet, quite frankly. And I think it's, again, practice and allowing myself to know this is going to happen and it's going to be really scary in the moment, but it's going to work out over the long run. And my kid or my niece or my nephew or whoever it might be is going to be better off in the
Mm.
long run.
We see this even when we're talking in leadership development programs that we lead, um, that folks are really afraid to fail. And there's a sense of like, I need to get this right, or it's the end of the world, or, they're, so that makes them hesitant sometimes to make decisions, or it makes them hesitant to make bold decisions.
Yeah.
And so to give kids agency and allow them to fail and realize that it's not the end of the world when they're at that age is going to help them prepare them for the rest of their lives and for being better leaders later on too.
Yeah, 100%. Again, it's really hard, but hopefully we have the life experience to show like you mess up, you something happens, life isn't over. You're not happy and it stinks and it's frustrating and it's not maybe not good, but you'll bounce back, right? And you'll learn something in that moment specifically, um, and it will shape the next decision, the next outcome, without even sort of thinking about it, right? It will shape your next outcome, and that builds and compounds over days, weeks, months, years to where we are today. And guess what? I I still make many mistakes and decisions in business and in life. And instead of noodling on it or mulling over or letting it ruin my day, my week, my month, learn from it and try not to make the same mistake twice, the same exact mistake twice, but then move on. And I think that's a really difficult thing to do unless you practice it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think again, I think we all have a problem and we say it, right? Oh, it's okay to fail, it's okay to this, but when your kid comes home with a bad grade, the frustration may be on your face. Is it okay to fail in that moment, right? Those are teachable moments, and I think parents specifically across the board, I'll point my finger at myself, have to do a better job at that.
Mm. What is your number one challenge as a CEO as you look at the last half of 2023?
Wow, so many challenges that are in place. I would say, you know, to me, the number one goal, at least my goal as a leader in an organization, um, is to get the best out of people, right? You are hiring people, partnering with people because they're good at something, they're great at something, and you want to be able to foster that and have them grow and learn and get better and better and better. And so, how do you do that, right? There's a level of agency
Yes.
and freedom, um, and trust. I think that's really important. And when you're in a startup or small environment, and now when you're working somewhat remotely, our company, some people are in New York and we have an office, and some people are, wherever they might be, Florida, Nevada, etc. You're not there. You're not seeing what they're doing every day, right? So it's even tougher in the environment we're in today. So I think creating a culture that people want to get better, that people aren't afraid to ask the question, how, what, can I have extra? How do I do this? What does it really mean? Is really important as a leader, right? So I spend my day, part of my day, every day thinking about what can I do to make Tara's job easier? How can I support her in which way? How can I also reiterate as a leader that we're all marching in this direction? Let's continue to do that. It is really easy, as a young company, even a growth stage, later stage company, shiny new toy syndrome. Ooh, this client wants this. This should be our new strategy. Let's go. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. I fall into that trap. I get it. You get excited, and I think a lot of people say you can't get too high, too low, right? Try to stay in the mighty middle. And I'm a guy who wears everything on his sleeve. So that's especially tough for me because when I get high, I get really high. When I get low, I get low. But people see that. They see it on the Zoom call. They see it in your expressions. They see it in the tone of your email, or your Slack messaging. So again, really important to continue to align everybody, excite everybody about why they're here, and be transparent with everybody. We live in a transparent world where people can get information like this. Just be upfront. uh Very few times I think will it be a negative outcome if you're upfront about things, and ahead of things. So again, I have a laundry list of challenges, but there's a couple at the top that I constantly think about.
Mm. Um, what is the greatest opportunity that you see for companies like yours in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think specifically companies, that are addressing the broad umbrella of mental health. I think there is a time now that, there's ebbs and flows to trends and other things, but I can see at this sort of the teenagers and even some of the middle school, there's a groundswell happening that they are asking for the support. It's not just a check the box item for them. It could be a check the box item for a corporation, an entity, an institution, or even a school. For kids, it's not a check the box exercise, right? They are living it every day with their friends. And I think right now that we should be listening more to those young men and women about what they're asking for, what they're looking for, resources, support services. And we might be the adults and we might be smarter and have all these degrees, but listening to the person you're trying to reach is the best advice and strategy that there ever could be. And I think there's an opportunity to listen and follow up on that and address some of those things that are coming up from the people that we want to help. And there's some consistency I see in that messaging right now, and it's telling me that um, more support is needed. Right, more support than Robin can even. Right, we handle one tier or a handful of tiers. there are so many things that need to be supported. So all those companies out there that they're doing wonderful things, keep doing it, and listen more. Sort of maybe the obvious advice.
I think another thing that kind of comes to mind with this, with just the obviously speaking with your wife, talking about AI, talking about all of these huge things that are changing. And you and I were talking earlier about what's school going to look like when kids aren't, when there aren't enough teachers. It seems to me that we also could kind of just go back to a blank slate and just reimagine things. Now, we might not be able to totally provide a completely new thing right away, but to reimagine and then look at where we're at and try to figure out, okay, so what of this reimagining could actually be applied now? I think that's another thing that in this sort of situation could be really valuable.
Yeah, I think so. And there are some people well ahead of this in the schools ecosystem. There are some leaders and teachers out there that have been thinking about this, doing things. I remember talking to a school, I think it was in southern Texas, and they are so ahead of the game, right? There are so many things happening at that school. And I said, you don't need Robin services. You're doing a great job. I'm going to learn from you about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And you're giving just unbelievable agency to everybody. I know there's the superintendent, Dr. Shepard, Dr. Quentin Shepard out in Victoria, Texas, that is, from everything I see and hear, just a wonderful sort of school programming. And again, I think that's listening, understanding, and true leadership is getting ahead of it, getting ahead of things and innovating. And, you know, like healthcare and education and many of these industries, you're not going to change the world in a year or even a few years. What you're going to change, you start reimagining and innovating, and you're going to take these sort of micro steps or steps that are too small to fail, right? Just inch forward, because every day you inch, by the end of the week, the end of the month, you've moved, right? You've moved the needle. And I think a lot of young companies and innovators feel they have to do something in a flash, right, to prove to the customer, the network, your investor base. I think if there's consistency and you're seeing positive outcomes, keep moving,
Mm.
right? Push that boulder up the hill, right? We all know what that's like. Um, Keep going and keep trying new things
Mhm.
and involve your kids. I was at a school board meeting, students were presenting. How can you have a school board meeting without students there, right? I'm thinking to myself, this is right. And this one school board, wonderful, had kids talk on different issues and had a debate. That's what we're missing a little bit, right? It's okay to get two perspectives. That's not a bad thing when people disagree. It's a bad thing when we're not listening to each other, but it's not
Yeah.
a bad thing if people disagree. And that's how innovation comes, right? You debate, you converse, you figure out the right way forward.
Mhm. All right. Mental health of your employees. So you're here to help others. How do you that this is one of the biggest concerns that we hear with CEOs too. Is this a concern of yours in your own company? I mean, what do you guys do to help with the mental well-being of your employees?
Yeah, fair enough. And it's interesting because you think about it, like we're doing all this work for our customers, schools, and what are we doing for ourselves, right? Are we drinking our own Kool-Aid, if you will? So interestingly enough, again, living in a somewhat remote world where employees are everywhere or traveling, I think it's important to connect with each other. And I want to recreate the water cooler or bumping into each other, or your virtual coffee, by having these meetings with sometimes very detailed agenda. Here's what we're going to. Here's who's leading it, right? A business meeting. But sometimes let's just all jump on Zoom, and maybe somebody can't because they're picking up their kid from school or they have a customer meeting ran late. But let's just talk, right? Let's have a conversation. Let's connect with each other. And then every Friday, sort of this mindfulness Friday, every team member, again, we have a small team, but it rotates, leads the Friday meeting. And we always start, maybe it's a breathing exercise, maybe it's a story, maybe it's a writing, maybe it's a song, maybe it's whatever they want to do to make their voice heard and talk about something on their mind, their family's
Mm,
mind, what they saw. And again, for me, in building a company, you can't build a company without building a culture. Right? The culture is bigger than the company. You create a culture by the people you hire. It's not beer pong or free coffee or that stuff is fun, sure. Culture. I read this quote the other day, and it's not perfect, but culture is sort of the way you feel on Sunday night heading into Monday morning. To me, that's the best definition of company culture. Like, what is that feeling? Do you have a pit in your stomach, or are you excited to go? And that to me is really defines kind of who you are, and we all have our bad days, and every Sunday night doesn't have to be perfect. um, but when you hear in your employees they're tired, or something happened, or you lost a big deal, or they worked so hard and the board rejected the plan, what do you do for them right at that moment? And again, allowing that, giving agency and letting people talk about it. Right, let's talk as a team. It can be one-on-one with me if you feel more comfortable, but I am a big proponent of having conversations together, especially as a small team. Now when you grow and you have 80 people over Zoom, really tough to have an intimate conversation. But as a younger company growing, extremely important to build those bonds, because when we are an 80, 120, 2,000 person company, I want those leaders today to take that and do that with their own respective teams or geographies. And the only way to do it is to do it.
mm. So, as a company that really cares about personal agency, you want your coaches, I'm sure, to feel like they're experts, know that you respect them as experts. Um, how do you address performance? I mean, that's a terrible word, but it's really like the whole idea of like checking in. Do you use micro check-ins? Do you do annual reviews? What is like the structural kind of way that you address that?
Yeah. Right now to me, I believe in constant feedback and in the moment feedback. Um, Waiting to the end of the year. Um, it's a good process, and as you get to be a bigger company, I think there's a good need for documentation, and a good need for documentation the whole way. But you forget in December when you do your annual review, you kind of remember what happened in October, November, and
Yeah.
you forget all the things that happened at the beginning of the year. So I think consistency, right, and then putting some structure around it, so we're all thinking about asking it the right way. The other thing, and we do this with our coaches specifically, after we're in a coaching session, we ask for feedback right away. And let me tell you about kids. But you probably know this because you have two. They are brutally honest, right? Like it or not. And you get feedback in that moment about what did you learn? Would you use this skill set? Obviously everybody wants to know, would you buy it again? Would you do it again? But there are other questions you can ask. So we do this 3-question survey after a lot of our sessions, and we get instantaneous feedback. And I think sharing that feedback the next day, the next week, when you have time, is really important. Twofold. One, it comes from the students or teachers or parents' mouths, right? Depending who the session is with. And two, it actually gives you as a colleague and a peer or leader an opportunity to actually review it together and, take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. And you don't know what that person is going through that day, or where they came from, or what their agenda might be. So if a coach got a lower rating or negative feedback, dissect it, right? People got a score of 2 out of 10. Try to understand that a little bit more before saying to your colleague, wow, you really blew this one, right? You got to understand. I think people like data so much, but understand what does it really mean, and look at the numbers and understand maybe the qualitative feedback you might have received during that time. We're all busy, right? We all want the headline and good, bad, the big red letter grade on the paper. You kind of like got to dissect it a little bit, but that takes time. And with everything, right? Finding a balance and a process. Even early on, find a process so it's consistent. It's part of the playbook. You're a Robin coach, you get the 3 questions. Next Wednesday, you're going to get the report, right? If we can commit to that cadence, we build a culture of feedback. And now everybody expects it, and I expect it at the end of the day. I talk to my team, what can I do better? I probably can do everything better. but where should I focus my time? Right? How can I be better in these situations, or with these colleagues and team members? So constant feedback, but it's hard because we're all doing 1,000 things. And again, this is a priority for us because that's how we learn. That's how we get our product and our service better. That's how we get our people better. That's who we know that these people will survive and grow. And sometimes we need to make those tough decisions and say, actually, we're at a point and a phase in our company's life cycle that we need somebody else to come in and help us and support us.
Do you guys have managers? Do you have that structure right now, or is that something you anticipate in the future?
We do. We have sort of a leadership team and managers on our team. And I think it's important. Um, you know, everybody has a different philosophy on this, but I think there is something important about decision makers, right? At the end of the day, a company is a group of decisions that need to be made too, right? That's how you grow to the next people make decisions. And decision making is not easy. Um, because again, fear of making the wrong decision, or your inability to move things forward. Um, and those that show the capacity and the capability to make a decision, hopefully more right than wrong, um, elevate to those leadership positions and elevate them to a chance to design their own teams and their own structures. I have an enormous amount of trust up and down the team. But I have a colleague of mine, Linda Thompson. She's our VP of Customer Success and oversees really everything. I mean, I just have so much faith and trust in her and her ability to move things forward. And when she's not happy with something, she will tell me and tell me why. And she has just an enormous amount of respect across the board. And I have so much respect for her and her ability. And I think every organization needs someone like her
Mm,
um, to to kind of move things forward.
that's awesome. When you think about management, what are the top two or three biggest challenges around that managers might be facing?
I briefly mentioned this. It's um, timing and people in the sense of, kind of from startup to whether it's 10, 20, 30 people or a revenue metric. I think there's these different stages of companies that need different people to help them get to that next stage. And I think one of the biggest challenges is making that call,
Mm,
because someone who got you to an unbelievable point, who in your heart of hearts won't get you to that next level, making that decision is really difficult. And I think every manager is faced with that at some point in their career. Um, uh, Also, everybody has a boss. I don't care what your title is, everybody's got a boss. I think managing up is also a skill set that I think I've learned some of it. I'm still learning on how to manage up. And I think a lot of managers know how to tell people what to do, but don't necessarily know how to manage their peers or their boss or their boss's boss or their board, right? And work with them. I would say those two I can think of right now as across the board in a handful of companies I've been at, and I see and I talk to my friends about. I think those are the two probably things that I hear the most.
mm. So, what top two or three skills would you say that managers really need to have? Top. I know there's lots, but
Yeah, there's lots. To me, being decisive is so critical. Again, even making the wrong decision, but being able to make the decision is just something. So many companies, it's tough. It is really tough to make decisions. I think that skill set is um, I also think authenticity. Um, you know, people can see through things. Kids can see through everything. Within 30 seconds, I joke around. A Robin coach can walk into a session, get online, uh, and kids will know he's a quote unquote, she's a quote hired gun. Right, they're here. They don't really care. Or wow, this person cares. And whatever skill set to see that we all learn at maybe a young age as kids. I think authenticity as a leader is right up there with a top skill set for the best people out there.
mm.
Um,
Okay, one more question for you after I ask you, how can people connect with Robin? Like, who should be looking to you and to your company for solutions, and how can they find you?
Well, thank you for asking. Superintendents, principals, school counselors, social workers, they all reach out to us in different capacities. You could go to our website, my-robin, robin.com. A great way to find us. You can connect, you can download the white paper, you can download some sample lessons, check out some videos. We put it all out there. We don't want to waste your time. We feel that there's parts and elements of our program for everybody out there. So take a look at it. You can reach out to me specifically at sunny@my-robin.com. But take a look. I encourage people to go there and see what we're all about. And if it's something that resonates with your community, please reach out, and we'd happy to like to give you a call to learn more about what you're facing and to see if we're the right solution.
Hmm. Great. Okay. So this is the Voice of Influence podcast. I would like to ask you one more question. What last piece of advice would you like to give to people who would like to have a voice of influence?
Interesting question. If you want to have a voice of influence, my advice to you is form an opinion on something. Put yourself out there. Again, going back to that decision making and being decisive, so many people want to be an influencer, start a company, go to that next level professionally or personally. And the best advice I can give somebody is try, do it, do something small, head in that direction. And this is more, sort of my style. You can write your strategy, you can put things down on paper, but until you give it a go, you will never know. And just put yourself out there. And again, don't be afraid to make the wrong decision, but put it out there. And once you put it out there and you really believe in it, other people will see that authentic voice coming out. And if you want to influence anybody on anything, yes, you have to be a subject matter expert, but you have to be authentic about what you're talking about. And then it comes pretty easily after that. So put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to make the bad call. And I think that sort of is an unbelievable recipe for success.
Thank you so much for being here, Sunny, and for the work that you guys are doing with Robin. It's so needed, and I just appreciate your time today. Thank you for being a voice of influence for our listeners too.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing. You spent 55 minutes with me. You did your diligence on the website and the white paper. And I'm so lucky to have done a handful of these recently and hope to do a lot more. But you're really thorough. And I thought you put your thoughts into this. And I respect that a lot. So thank you.